Hello students, welcome to Sreenath. In this video, we are going to discuss the 12th chapter in your CBSE Class 8 science subject. The chapter name is friction. Okay, my name is Karthik Nune. We are creating all videos on all subjects for class 6 to class 8. So please subscribe our channel and our videos are 100% free. So please don't forget to subscribe our channel. Also follow on Instagram and join our Telegram channels. Have a nice. Okay, students. Now we will discuss this 12th chapter. In the beginning, we are going to have an overview of all the topics in this chapter, and after that we will discuss each topic in detail. Okay, what is the chapter name? The chapter name is friction. Okay, how many topics we are having in this chapter? We are having 6 topics in this chapter. First, we are going to have an overview of all the 6 chapters. Later, we will discuss each topic in detail. Okay, the first topic is force of friction. So, what is the force of friction? You are going to learn about that. What is the force of friction, or what is frictional force? And next topic is the factors affecting friction. What is the factors affecting the friction, and what factors friction depending upon? So we are going to discuss that topic. The third topic is friction, a necessary evil. What is the friction? Friction, a necessary evil. Friction is a necessary one, and at the same time it is an evil one. In which cases it is necessary, in which cases it behaves like an evil. We are going to learn about this. The fourth topic is increasing and decreasing friction. How we can increase friction, or how we can reduce friction. We are going to know about it. And the fifth topic is wheels reduce friction. What happens means wheels can reduce the friction. How wheels can reduce friction? What is the friction when wheels are used? We call as. And the sixth topic and last topic is fluid friction. Okay, these are the 6 topics we are going to learn, students. If you are enjoying this session, please like the session, please like the video and share with your friends. Now we are going to have we are going to discuss each topic in detail. We are having basically 6 topics. We will discuss each topic in detail. Okay, students, we are going to discuss each topic in detail. What is the first topic? The first topic is the force of friction. Okay, before going to discuss this topic, I will ask you some questions. When you put your step on banana peel, what happens? You will slide. And what happens on a smooth road? Vehicles will slide. What is the reason? The sliding of the vehicles and for your slip down when you put your step on banana peel. What is the reason? Can you ever thought about it? Can you ever think about it? Why you are sliding, or why you are sliding like this? Here is the image. He has put his leg on this banana peel and he has slipped down. Why? Can you ever think about it? No problem. You will discuss what is the reason for it in this chapter. Okay. Now, what is the first topic is? First topic is force of friction. How we can understand this force means, suppose here is the book and this man is applying some force on this book on this side. What happens? Here is the first initial stage. He applied some force on this. What happens? It moved some distance, and after moving some distance, it stopped. So now what he had done? He had applied the force in opposite direction. What happened? In this direction he applied force, again he pushed it and it goes on some distance and again also stopped. So why it is stopping? Why it is stopping after moving some distance? Previously what he had thought that maybe I am applying this side force, so there may be any force on this side, so that's why it is stopping. So he changed his mind and he applied force in this direction. When he applied force in this direction also, after going some time, it is stopping. Why? Basically the book is in rest position. It is in the rest position. Book is in rest position. After some time, the book is in motion, which means it is moving. After some time, what happened? It again comes to rest position. Okay, basically what we have done here, we have pushed here, push. So what push is called? Push or pull is called nothing but force. So we have pushed the book here, which means we have applied the force. So what force has done here? Force changed its state from rest to motion. Basically, if you studied about force, what happened? If you studied about force, force can change its state of motion. We have studied it in the previous class, previous chapter. Okay, not in the previous class, previous chapter. Okay, the chapter before the friction is the force. In that case, what we have learned, force can change the state of motion. Here the book is in the state of rest. Here the book is in the state of motion. So what happens when we applied the force? It changed the state from rest to motion. Okay, that's it. Okay, its state is changed. Why its state is changed? Because we have applied some force. Okay, until now it's okay. Now what happened? Again its state is changed. Why here it is changed? Whether we have applied any force in this direction here? No, we didn't apply any force in this direction here. But why its state is changed? But we know that force only can change state of motion. So finally, what is the reason? Means here the state is changed. So there might be a force acting on it. Maybe that force has changed the state of motion. Maybe there might be any force. That force is the reason for the change in state of the motion. Why? Because means change in state occurs only when force is applied. We have learned it in the previous chapter, that is force. So here change in state is applied. So here there might be any force. That force is called as friction. We call that invisible force called as friction. What is the force? Friction. So that friction force changed its state from motion to rest. And one thing is, see this example, we have applied force in this direction, so it changed from rest to motion, and after some it is stopped. After some time it has stopped. Why? Because it is stopped means some other forces acted, so that's why it is stopped. Basically we have applied force in the beginning in this direction, so it moved in this direction, but after some time moving, what happened? It is stopped. Why it is stopped? Means the force of friction is acting in this direction. That's why this book is stopped. If it is this force, that is friction force, is acted in this direction, that's why the book is stopped. If suppose assume that if force of friction is added in this direction, what happened? This is the applied force, this is the force of friction. Then what happened to the book? The book will goes on. It will never stops, because there are two forces acting in same direction. Because previous chapter we have learned that if two forces or any forces acting in the same direction, they will add up, and if the forces acting on the opposite direction, they will subtract. So here the force is acted on opposite direction. That's why only the book is stopped. That's why only the state of the book is changed from motion to rest. So finally, if we find out a new force, we call that force as friction force. What it is? Friction force. Okay, in which direction it is applied, or in which direction it is acted? It is acted in the direction opposite to the motion of the book. Here the direction of motion is there, and the friction direction is here, so it is in the opposite direction to the motion. In this case, we have applied force in this direction. What happened? If friction is also in this direction, what happened? The book will goes on. It will never stops. But what happening? The book is stopping after some time. So what might be the reason? There may be any other force which acting in opposite direction to the motion's direction. So that force is called the friction force. So again, in this direction also, when we have applied force in this direction, friction acted in this direction. In this case, we have applied force in this direction, then friction changed its direction, it is acting in this direction. So finally, what we can conclude is that frictional force is the opposite force. It opposes the relative motion, it always opposes the relative motion. Friction force which always acts opposite to the motion. it always acts in a direction opposite to the motion. This is the direction of motion, it is acting in the opposite direction. It is the direction of motion, it is in the acting upon the opposite direction. So in every case, friction will always act in the opposite direction to the motion direction. If motion is in this direction, then friction is in this direction. That is the one we have concluded. So frictional force always acts in opposite direction to the motion. Opposite direction to the motion. Okay. So you saw that if you apply the force along the left, friction acts along the right. What happens if you apply the force, actual direction is on the left, then the friction direction is right. This we have seen in this example. So finally, what we can conclude that the force of friction always opposes the applied force. What happens? The force of friction or the friction force always opposes the applied force. It always opposes the applied force. So in the above activity, the force of friction acts between the surfaces of the book on the surface of the table. Previously, one thing we have missed here is that we have applied force on this book from this side and it goes on stopping. Why? Because it is stopping. A force is acting on this book. That force is in the opposite direction, and which is applying this force on this book means basically the book is on the table. Basically is the book. It is on the table. It is on the table. Okay. This table, this is the table. So the table is applying the force on the book. In this case, we have applied the force on the book in this direction, but in this case, the friction force comes into play and stops the book. Which applied the friction force means basically the table. Here is the table. The table is applying the force on the book. So the force of friction is due to the table, or the force of friction is due to the surface. So the force of friction is due to the surface in contact. So the force of friction is always acts between when two surfaces are in contact. If suppose this book is on some height h and which is in air, then the table will not exert force on this. The table will not exert force on it. So finally, what we can conclude is force on book is applied by surface of table. And what another thing? Force means friction force on book is applied by surface of table. Friction force acts opposite to actual motion of book. Actual motion of book, students. Okay. So basically what here it is that the force of friction always opposes the applied force, and in the above activity the force of friction acts between the surface of the book and the surface of the table. Where the frictional force is acting, it is acting between the surface of the book and the surface of the table. So the friction force is a contact force. It acts between the two surfaces which are in contact only. When two surfaces are in contact, then only frictional force will act. And in this example, the table is exerting the frictional force on the book. So that is about the friction. So friction is nothing but friction is an force which acts when two surfaces are in contact. And another thing we have to remember is frictional force always acts in the opposite direction to the actual motion. Okay, these are the two things you have to put in your mind. That is about the first topic, students. We have completed the first topic. Now we have entered into the second topic. What is the second topic? Factors affecting friction. So we have studied about frictional force and what are the factors affecting the frictional force. Now we are going to learn about it. Suppose you take a brick and tie a thread to it and tie the thread to a spring balance and try to pull this brick, what happens? Basically, the force you have applied while pulling the brick will be measured using the spring balance, because spring balance has springs inside it. By springs inside it, the spring balance will measure the force, how much force you are exerting in pulling the brick. Okay, now what happened if you pull the brick, placing it in this direction, you have to note down the force, how much force it requires to move the brick, or how much force it requires to move the brick. Okay, to overcome the static friction, or to overcome the friction, how much force you have to apply. Okay, next what you have to do now, wrap a piece of polythene around the brick and repeat the activity. Now what you have to do, now you have to wrap a piece of polythene around the brick, and again you have to pull the brick, and in another case also you have to measure the force using the spring balance. After seeing those results, what you will observe, when while you have wrapped the brick with some polythene, the force which is required to pull the brick is less when compared to the force we applied when there is no polythene. So finally what we can observe, that the force of friction is depending upon the smoothness. It is the doubt we have gotten after doing this experiment. In the beginning, what we have done, you have pulled this brick, and in another case we have pulled this brick, but in this case we have wrapped the brick with polythene cover, which is very smooth, which is having very smooth surface. In the second case, it is moved so easily, so less quantity of force is sufficient to move that brick. But in the first condition, it is very difficult, it takes some extra force to pull that brick. So finally what we can conclude that is, after another example, here is another activity you have to do. Here you have to make this inclined plane like this, and you have to mark A here, and you have to leave the this pen, what we call it as, maybe your pen, you can use anything like your pen or pencil, and you have to leave here and measure how much distance it goes. Next thing what you have to do, you have to place some cloth like this. What happened in this case also, you have to release that pen or pencil from that mark A, and it will also move some distance. In both cases you have to measure how much distance have they traveled. So observing this, what is the reason for the difference in the distance between these two incidents, and what is the reason when we have pulled the brick without a polythene and with polythene? After observing these two activities, we have a doubt and we have some clarity about that could the smoothness of the surface of the cell also affect the distance traveled by it? This is the doubt we have erased. What is the doubt means? Maybe the smoothness of the surface is affecting the distance, how it is traveling. In this case, it has traveled longer distance, it is traveled shorter distance. What is the difference? Why travel long, why travel short? Does the smoothness of the surface is the reason for it? Is the reason for the difference in the distance for it? This is the doubt they have got. And finally what they concluded is, friction is caused by the irregularities on the two surfaces. Basically friction is caused by the irregularities of the two surfaces on contact. What we have previously learned, that friction acts when there are two surfaces. When there are two surfaces, only friction will act. Friction is a contact force. It will act when there are two surfaces and two surfaces are in contact. So here, by doing these activities, what is the conclusion we are getting? That friction force due to the irregularities. Friction force is due to the irregularities between two surfaces. Irregularities between two surfaces. If the irregularities are more, then the friction force is more. If the irregularities are low, then the frictional force is low. Why? Because on the smooth surface, on smooth surfaces there are less irregularities. That's why the smooth surfaces, the pen goes long distance. In this case there is no that much of smooth surface. That's why the friction force is more. That's why the pen is stopped here. In this case, what happened in this case, previously without polythene there is no smooth surface, there is irregularities more. That's why their friction force is more. That's why it takes we have to apply more force to pull it. But when you wrap it with a polythene cover, the irregularities were covered, removed, and the irregularities are decreased, so that small force is enough to pull that brick. So finally what we have concluded, that friction which acts between two surfaces and friction which always opposes the motion, and the friction is based due to the irregularities between the surface in contact. Irregularities in the surface in contact. Friction is caused by the irregularities on the two surfaces in contact. If it is smooth, friction will be less. If it is rough, friction will be more. Basically when you see that this is the very smooth and polished table, then this surface also having any irregularities? Yes, that surface also having some irregularities. Even though it is looking like very smooth and surface, but microscopically if you see the microscopic view, this is the surface of the book and this is the surface of the table. In microscopical view there are so many irregularities on the surface in contact. Basically what is the friction force means, what is the why friction force acting means, due to these irregularities what happened, these two surfaces are locked in. What happened? Locked due to irregularities due to irregularities, the two surfaces which are in contact are locked. So we have to apply some force to overcome or to unlock the two surfaces. That unlocking force, that force required to unlock these two irregularly locked surfaces is called the frictional force. So frictional force is nothing but the force required to unlock the two surfaces which are in contact, or the force required to unlock the two surfaces. Basically they are locked due to their irregularities, so we have to unlock them. The force required to unlock the two surfaces is called friction. So that is the basically the friction is nothing but the force required to unlock the two surfaces, two adjoining surfaces. So again, if you have any experience when you're trying to push a large weight box, what happens when you're trying to push a large weight box? It is very much difficult. If any person comes on sitting on this book, on this metal box, it will be more difficult. Why? Because means and another example means, if somebody is on a mat, if you are to pull a mat in the first case, what is in the second case? In the second case there is a mat and another person or any box or they are on the mat, then what will you observe? Again you have to pull. What will you observe? Here the friction is more. Here the friction is more. Here the friction is less. Why the friction increased means, basically in the case of these in situations we understand that friction depends upon the irregularities of friction depends on roughness or irregularities. That is the one thing we have to one thing we have understood. And again in this case, when a person is sitting on a mat, you have to pull. When you have to put without a person, in these two cases what you have observed, friction is more on this case and friction is less on this case. So finally what we can conclude is that when if normal force increases, then friction also increases. Basically when a person is sitting or anything is adding upon this, the normal force will increase. What happens? Normal force will increase. Well, increase when objects or persons are lying on the mat or anything. So what happened when normal force increase? Friction also increase. Friction also increase. But here there is only one mat only, so the normal force is N1 only. Why N only? In this case, the normal force is only due to the W1. W1 is nothing but the weight of the mat. Okay, in this case, the normal force is equal to N, that is equal to, here it is the N1, here it is the N2. It is due to the W1, which is the weight of the mat, and plus W2, which is the weight of the person. So here what happens? N2 is greater than N1. That's why friction force F2 is greater than F1. Friction force, we represent friction force with smaller, F2 greater than F1. So what happens? Normal force increase, friction also increase. So finally what we can conclude is that friction depends upon roughness and also on normal force. What it is? Normal force. So friction depends on roughness and friction depends on normal force. When roughness increase, friction increase. When normal force increase, friction also increase. So these are the factors. These are the two factors which are affecting the friction force. So these are the two factors which are affecting the frictional force. Factors affecting friction. What are the factors affecting the friction? The two factors which are affecting the friction are nothing but the roughness and the normal force. These are the two forces which are acting, which are affecting the friction. The third topic, we have completed the second topic, students. We have entered into the third topic. The third topic is friction a necessary evil. Friction is it friction necessary? Yes, friction is necessary. Why means if you want to write with a pencil, you have to hold it. For that purpose, we need some friction. Without the friction, you can't write using your pen. Without the friction you can't walk. Why? Because if you personally experience it daily, you will walk, and when surfaces are very watery and very when surfaces are very smooth, try to walk on those surfaces. It will be very difficult for you to walk on smooth surfaces or the surfaces we have just cleaned. Suppose any room is just clean now and it is very so much of water on the surface, and that surface is basically the smooth marble stone surface, and it is cleaned just now with water, and now we have to move on and walk on that surface. What happens? It will be more difficult than walking on normal road or walking on normal surfaces, which means without friction we can't walk. So without friction we can't hold or write using a pen. Without friction we can't hold anything. If you want to hold anything, you have to get grip. That grip is nothing but friction. So you have to hold anything, the two surfaces must have friction. They must have irregularities. The two surface irregularities must be what happened? The two irregularities must be locked. Then only you can hold the objects or anything. So without friction you can't walk, without friction you can't hold, without friction you can't write. So friction is everywhere, and your bikes and your cars are, when brakes are applied, they are stopping. But on the rainy season, policemen and traffic police also suggest that, or in some boards they will advertise like that, roads are very slippery, please take care, extra care, otherwise your bikes will be skidded, your bikes will be slided. Why they are sliding? Why they are skidding on a rainy season or a rainy after rain? Why? Because means when rain comes, after the surfaces will become smooth. So due to the smoothness, what happens? Friction will reduce. Basically we have studied earlier now, friction depends upon roughness and normal force. If roughness is decreased, which means smoothness is increased, friction will be small. So when in rainy season roads will be watery, they will be wet, so that's why roughness will decrease, so friction will decrease. When friction will decrease, when you ride a bike, when you apply brake, if you if you not taken if you not taken any care, then what happened, sometimes your bikes will skid due to the watery surface, due to the rainy season, due to the decrease in the roughness, due to the loss of friction. So when there is no friction, we can't write, we can't ride, we can't hold, we can't do anything. So for any purposes, for many purposes, we require friction. Friction is basically between two surfaces in contact, and friction always acts in the opposite direction. Friction depends upon two things, that is the roughness and normal force. Okay, at the same time, friction is also having some disadvantages also. What are those disadvantages? When what happened, what are the disadvantages means? What are the disadvantages means? Suppose when some machinery is running, due to the friction, when some machinery is running, they will heat up. Just your familiar example is your mixer grinder. If you run your mixer grinder in your home, after some time, if you run it with a heavy load, what happened, after some time heat will be produced. Why heat is produced? Heat produced when there is loss of energy. When heat produced is the sign that energy is lost. Why heat produced means due to the lack of due to the friction. Why means friction, what friction will do? Friction will oppose the relative motion. So when there is opposition of the relative motion, then due to the arrangements and due to the system of that arrangements, the motion will be stopped, restricted or resisted due to the friction. So that's why heat will be produced. If you in the familiar example is, in some cases what will we do? We will pour oil to the doors centers. Why? Because means if you pour oil, the doors will be opened and closed easily. And the same thing, we will apply some grease or oil to the cycles, bikes and cars. Why we are applying means to reduce the friction. If you reduce the friction, they will run smoothly. If the friction is not reduced, they will run hardly, so that it takes so much of energy, and so much of energy will be lost, so much of heat will be produced. So those are the negative things or the bad things friction will do or friction will affect. On the other hand, friction is an evil. Why means it wears out the materials. Like that, here are the chappals. What happened? Shoes, they are wear out due to the friction. Why? We always try using those shoes, always friction acts, so that only we can walk. So repeated action of the friction, repeated walking, what happens? The friction is damaging this. This is the one thing. And you must have seen worn out steps of foot or bridges. And another thing is, friction also produces heat. What happens? Friction will produce heat. If you observe it, take your two hands and rub it. What happened? Due to the friction, you will observe some heat. Okay. So this is the example. Friction will produce heat. In this case also, what it is? It is the matchbox case. When you rub the matchstick with the box, what happens? Basically the two surface. If you observe clearly, the matchbox has the rough surface. If you rub it around the rough surface, what happens? Heat will be produced. So friction will produce heat. And what the evil effects of friction means? Friction will worn out the things or anything. Okay. And ball bearings or shoes, etc. So basically, in the case of cycles or bicycles, you use ball bearings like that. Why? Because means to reduce friction. So in this case also, we use some oil grease to reduce friction. If there is no oil grease, they will struck and they will produce heat, they will damage. So basically, friction damage machinery. So those are the good things and the bad things about the friction. Now we have completed our third topic. Now we have entered into the fourth topic. The fourth topic is increasing and decreasing friction. How we can increase friction and how we can decrease in friction. Basically, if you see examples of tires and chappals, they have some irregularities on the surfaces like that. Why they are having that irregularities means these irregularities will increase the friction. So that they will get sufficient grip. Basically, if you understand the brake system, when you are moving in a car or bike or any vehicle, when you apply brakes, what happens? The brakes are not directly stop the rotation of the tires. They will attach it. They are attached to the rim only. This is the tire. And the cycle tires like that. Suppose cycle tire. This is cycle tire. Here there is a rim. There is rim. In the case of cycle, when brakes applied, the rim is stopped. Rim is stopped because the brakes are attached to rims. When you brakes applied, the rim is stopped. And what happened eventually? The rim is attached to the tire, so rim stopped. So rotation of tire will be stopped. But if it does not have irregularities, what happens is the rotation may be stopped, but it can slide. Basically, this is happening in rainy seasons. What happens when we apply brakes in rainy season? The bikes or cycles or anything will slide. In the case of sliding, their tires are not rotating about themselves. They are not rotating. They will be stopped by using. They will be holded by using the brakes. Brakes will hold the rim, and that whole rim will hold the tire. But what happened? The motion of the whole vehicle is not stopping. It may be sliding. Why it is sliding means during the rainy season there are no irregularities. Water will come and it remove the irregularities. But when there is no rainy season, what happens? Basically, this tire is having this type of irregularities, and this type of irregularities are interlocked. What we have previously learned, that friction is nothing but locking. Friction is due to irregularities. When two surfaces are in contact, the irregularities of the two surfaces will lock in. That lock-in force is the lock-in force. The force remove the unlock the surface irregularities is called the friction. So when there is summer season or no rain, no lubricants, what happens? These irregularities will lock with the surface of the road. Then eventually the bike or cycle will comes to rest. But when in the case of rainy season, the irregularities are not locked due to water, and what happened? The tires will be slided. It will go smooth even though you have applied the brakes. So how we can increase the friction means friction is basically due to roughness. If you increase the roughness, the friction will increase. Roughness means irregularities. If you increase the irregularities on the tires, then your friction will be increased. Okay, in this way you can increase the friction. Another thing is how to decrease friction. Friction can be decreased using lubricants. I will give you example. This is the game of carom boards. You played this game many times, I think. While playing this game, what will we do? We will add some powder. Why we are adding some powder means, what powder will makes? Powder will reduce the friction. Basically, in carom boards there are so many caroms. There is a striker. With striker you will strike any one of the carom, and that carom has to be traveled on the board. So there are two surfaces. One is carom, another is the board. These are the two surfaces. When there are two surfaces in contact, there is friction force. That's why the friction, what friction will do? Friction will always oppose the relative motion. So if you strike the carom with a striker, what happens? It will move up to some time, but friction will stops it. So in order to reduce the friction, what you will do? You will apply some powder. What it will do? It will It will be in between it will be act between these two surfaces. What are the two surfaces? That is, one is the carom and the another is the board. These two surfaces, and it acts like a lubricant. And what will it will do? It will reduce the irregularities. Is the surface of one, it is surface 2, and this is the lubricant. This is the powder, which what will it will do? It will reduce the friction. So what is the friction means? What is the lubricants means? The substances which reduce friction are called lubricants. Lubricants are nothing but the substances which reduce the friction are called lubricants. Here powder is the lubricant which is reducing the friction. Okay, so in the carom board we use powder as a lubricant to reduce the friction between the caroms and the board. Okay. So basically, in order to reduce friction, we use lubricants. Lubricants will come in between the two surfaces in contact, and they will basically they are in the form of liquid. Now they will cover the irregularities, and they will cover the irregularities. They will reduce the friction. In order to increase the friction, you have to make more irregularities. That is about the fourth topic, students. We have completed the first topic. Now we have entered in the fifth topic. What is the fifth topic? Fifth topic is wheels reduce the friction. Suppose if there is this is the wheel bag. This is the wheel bag. What happened? There are so much of luggage here, but when you attach wheels to it, even a small kid can easily move it. But without wheels, if you have so much luggage, even for elders also, even also for bigger people also, it is very tough. So finally, another experiment. Suppose there are pencils and you have placed one book on the pencils and you pushed it. What happens? It will be very easy to push the book. And in the another case, you didn't use any pencils on the same table and try to push the book and try to measure the distance in the both cases. What happens? You have to apply more force when there are no pencils, but you have to apply less force in the case when there are pencils. So finally, what happened? When one body rolls over the surface of another body, here one body, what is the one body? One body is book which is rolls on the surface of another body, which is rolls on the surface and another body. What is the another body here? Here it is the pencils are the another body. They are rolling on their rolling book is placed. So when one body rolls over the other surface of another body, the resistance to its motion is called rolling friction. It is called rolling friction. So normally, what is the friction means? When there are two surfaces in contact, there will be force called resistant force called friction. But when one surface is rolling on another surface, in this also in between these two also there is some resistant force. That resistant force is called rolling friction. What is rolling friction? It is rolling friction. Okay, so this is the rolling friction. Rolling reduces friction. If you by this experiment, what we have observed that pushing a book is without pencils is very difficult, and moving the book with pencils is very easy. So what we can finally concluded that by using the rollers or by rolling on other surfaces, it will be easy to move objects, to push objects. So what happened? Rolling friction reduces the actual friction, and rolling friction is less than rolling friction is less than the sliding friction. Previously, until now, we have sliding the books or anything objects on one surface, but now we have used some rollers like that, revolving rotating objects, so that we get rolling friction. The rolling friction is less than the sliding friction. So that's why, due to in this case of rolling friction, even the large amounts of weight value can be easily carried by a small persons when there are wheels. So wheels are the great invention of man's. Okay, since the rolling friction is smaller than the sliding friction, sliding is replaced in most machines by rolling. So sliding friction is higher and rolling friction is lower. So due to this reason, in many machineries, sliding friction is sliding movements are replaced by rolling friction, because rolling friction has less friction. Okay, by the use of ball bearings. How they are acquiring it means they are using ball bearings. These are the ball bearings in the cycle. Here are the balls. Here also the balls. These ball bearings, what happened? They will rotate. It is connected to rim. It is connected to another pedal. We rotate it chain. So these ball bearings, what they are going to normally these two surfaces have to be slide one over other, but it has so much of friction. By the use of these ball bearings, what happened? These two surfaces are moving one another very easily. Here the friction is reduced. So in this case, in so many machineries, what happened? Sliding motion is replaced with rolling motion with the use of ball bearings. Why? Because in the case of sliding, the friction is more. In the case of the rolling, the friction is less. So rolling friction is less than the sliding friction. So we have completed the fifth topic also. Now we are going to discuss another topic, that is the sixth topic, that is fluid friction. What it is? Fluid friction. Fluid friction. Until now we have discussed friction between two surfaces, and the two surfaces are solids. Then what are fluids? In science, fluids are nothing but liquids. We called liquids and gases together as fluids. Okay, until now we have discussed that the different solid surfaces are having friction. Does the liquids are having friction? Does gases are having friction? Now we are going to learn about it. Basically, liquids and gases are also having friction. Basically air is very light and thin. Air is very light and thin, but even though it is very light and thin, it will also exert friction on objects which are moving through them. And water is also it is movable form, but it also exerts friction on objects which are moving through them. Okay, so we called, in science we called liquids and gases as fluids. So we can say that fluids exert force of friction on objects in motion. Okay, basically the friction force exerted by fluids, which means the friction force exerted by liquids and gases, are called drag. We call it as drag. Okay, the frictional force on an object in a fluid depends on its speed. Okay, what are the factors? The fluid friction depends. The fluid friction depends upon the speed of the object, how much speed it is moving in the fluid, and another thing is the shape of the object. Another thing is the nature of the fluid. What is the nature of the fluid? These three things, fluid friction depends. Okay, on its speed with respect to the fluid, and the frictional force always depends on the shape of the object and nature of the fluid. Okay, and one thing is, when objects move through fluids, they have to overcome friction acting on them. What happens when objects are moving in fluids, which means when any object is moving in liquids and gases, they have to overcome the fluid friction. So in order to overcome the fluid friction, they have to apply some force. In order to apply some force, they have to lose some energy to overcome those friction. If there is friction is high, they have to apply so much of force. So in order to apply so much of force, they have to lose their so much of energy. So if high amounts of energy is lost just to overcome the friction of the fluids, which means when going to liquids or gases, then the whole energy of our body or the any objects will be very decreased. Basically, what we'll see, fishes are moving in the liquids, water, and the birds are flying in the sky. They are always moving in the fluids, which means they are always moving in the gases and liquids. If they are, but they eat something and they will get energy, and in order to overcome the fluid friction, if the fluid friction is very high, they have to apply so much of force, so they have to lose so much of their energy, then they can't live for long. So how beautifully nature is designed means, their body shape is determined such that the shape, basically what we have discussed earlier, fluid friction depends upon the shape of the body also. So their body shape is designed like that, the less friction is there. So their body shape is designed in order to have less friction. like that their body design is shaped. So seeing that aeroplanes, we designed aeroplanes also. In order to aeroplanes, they are also have to move in the air, so they are also feeling some friction, fluid friction. If the fluid friction is high, then so much of force we have to apply and so much of our energy is lost. Basically, how we will get energy in machinery? We will get energy in machinery by rotating any machines. For the rotation of machines, we need petrol and diesel. If the fluid friction is more and we have to apply so much force, if in order to get so much of force, we have to use high efficiency engines and high power engines. In order to use high power engines, we need so much of petroleum. So if there is fluid friction is so much and we need so much of petroleum, so that for traveling small distance, what happened, so much of petrol will be consumed. So what happened, the cost of petrol is now is high. If in order to travel from 1 kilometer in the fluid, which means in the air, if it costs 10 liters petrol, then anyone will go through flight or anyone will go through air? No one will go through air. So why? Because means we have to lost so much of our energy. So aeroplanes are designed in such a way, seeing from the nature how birds are designed, so that maximum friction will be reduced by the shape of the object. So basically, what are the things you have to remember is fluid friction. Fluids means liquids and gases together called as fluids, and fluids also exert pressure, or fluids also exert friction on objects which are moving through them. Basically, fluid friction depends upon the relative speed of the object in the fluid and the shape of the object and the nature of the fluid. Okay, and the fluid friction we called as drag. Okay, if there is so much of fluid friction, we have to lose so much of energy. So how aeroplanes are designed? Aeroplanes are designed, their shape is designed to get less friction. Okay, that's all, students. Our chapter has completed. Chapter completed. Then what we have to go now? We have to do summary of the whole chapter, students. Now we are going to have the summary of whole chapter. What is the chapter name? Friction, force of friction. How friction will act means friction always acts in opposite direction. Frictional force acts in opposite direction, and friction on a block and friction acts in opposite direction, and friction acts in between two surfaces which are in contact. Friction acts in between two surfaces which are in contact. Basically, friction in this case book is moving and table is in rest position, so the table is exerting the frictional force on the book. So basically, frictional force which acts between the two surfaces in contact, and basically the frictional force which acts always in the opposite direction to the actual motion. These are the two things you have to remember in mind. And next, what are the factors affecting the friction? What are the factors affecting the friction? Factors affecting the friction are, the first factor is, where it is? Okay, the first factor is roughness, which means smoothness, roughness or irregularities. Basically the friction is due to the surface irregularities. Basically, when there are two surfaces in contacts, even though they looks like very smooth, they are having so many irregularities in micro level. Due to these irregularities, they will lock in. So frictional force is nothing but the force required to unlock these two surfaces. So basically, frictional force depending upon the roughness or irregularities. If there are more irregularities, the friction will be more. Irregularities we call as roughness. And another thing we observe is friction depending upon the normal force. Suppose if there is a mat and you have to put it and you have to pull it, and in another case if there is a mat and there is an object, in this case also you have to pull it. What happened when there is a mat or any person's when there are object or any person on the mat, it is very difficult to pull it. So in this case the friction is more. So finally, what we can observe that friction is depending upon the normal force. If there is increased normal force, friction will be increased. And what are the third topic is friction is a necessary evil. Friction, if friction is used to hold anything, or to write your book, or to walk, or for bikes to run. In all every cases friction is used. But at the same time, friction has some effects. Due to friction, your shoes will be damaged, and the machineries will heat, and machineries will damage, worn out. What all are the evil or bad effects of the friction. Okay, and while friction will produce heat also. While rubbing your hands, you will get heat, and while running machineries, you will get heat. So much of energy is lost due to heat. So friction is the disadvantages of friction are those. And how to increase and how to decrease friction. Basically, friction depending upon two things. One is roughness, which means irregularities. In order to increase friction, we have to increase irregularities. So for that purpose, in order to increase friction, our tires and shoes are having so many irregularities, so that we will get so much of grip. Okay, in this way, by increasing the grip, by increasing the irregularities, roughness, we can increase the friction. In how can we decrease the friction? If you decrease the roughness, or if you remove the irregularities, then friction will be reduced. In the game of caroms, we will sprinkle powder. Why we sprinkling means to reduce friction. What happens when there are two surfaces in contact? There are irregularities between them. If there is any anything, if you poured here, suppose example we are applying a lubricant here, what happens? This lubricant, what it will do? It will reduce the irregularity. So the substances which reduce friction are called lubricants. Lubricants are nothing but substances which reduce friction. So by the use of lubricants, we can decrease the friction. By increasing the irregularities, we can increase the friction. After that, wheels also reduce the friction. Basically, when one surface is rolling over the other surface, the friction is called rolling friction. But when one surface is sliding on the other surface, the friction is called sliding friction. Basically, sliding friction is more and rolling friction is less. So rolling friction is less than the sliding friction. By using wheels, what we can do? By using wheels or ball bearings, what we can do? We will replace the sliding motion with the rolling motion. What is the use for it? Means if you replace the sliding motion with the rolling motion, being the sliding motion is high and rolling friction is less, so our friction can be reduced. So that is the advantage of rolling friction. In the case of rolling friction, it is in the case of rolling, the rolling friction is very small, but in the case of sliding friction is very high. So we have to apply more force to overcome the sliding friction, but we need only small force to overcome the rolling friction. That's the reason many machineries are in many machineries we use ball bearings. Ball bearings are like that, so that the friction will be reduced. Okay, the last topic is fluid friction. In addition to solid surfaces, fluids also have friction. Fluids are nothing but liquids and gases. Basically, fluid friction depends upon the speed of the object in that fluid, and shape of the object, and the nature of the fluid. Fluids also exert pressure on the objects which flow through them or which move through them. Basically the fluid friction is called as drag. Okay, how aeroplanes are designed means they are designed to have they have given a shape so that the friction is less. So they are copied, or they are designed it by seeing the nature, by seeing the birds. That's it, students. That is about the whole chapter. We have completed our chapter. We have completed summary also. So finally, don't forget to Sreenath. Have a nice day. Bye bye.